So what we're going to do is we're going to go right over to the B-29 hangar because that's a half an hour in itself. This is our flagship aircraft. This is my little my project here. Not my project. This is the one I love the most, I should say. Okay. So this is our B-29. What's this famous for? Hiroshima, right.
It must be an early model. It doesn't have the supercharger.
Oh, it does have superchargers.
Does it?
Yes, it does. I'll actually show you. We have an engine open on the other side. All right, so this is the B-29, right? Atomic bomb. I call this the Space Shuttle of 1944. This had autopilot. This had onboard radar. This was the first pressurized bomber built. This had the Norden bomb sight. Because it was a pressurized bomber, the guns had to be on the outside of the envelope, and the guys had to be on the inside of the envelope of pressurization, so they were remote-controlled guns, unlike the B-17s where they were behind them, right? And it used computers for fire control. 1944. They made 3,700 of these. At the peak of the war, 3.5 a day out of 2 factories. In fact, during the peak of the war, America made 1 airplane every 5 minutes. The Bunce Pusher, 1912, right? Remember that? Wright brothers, right? Now we're at 1944, 30 years later. The wingspan on this airplane is longer than the Wright brothers' first flight. That's where we went in that short a time. This airplane was designed during the war. This was used for firebombing Tokyo. This never saw the European theater at all. This was used to fly the hump over the Himalayas for China. And this was used for the atomic bomb. And we're going to go into the bomb bay and I'm going to show you where it was and tell you about the 2 hours I spent with the navigator, the Enola Gay, in there because he came here. There's only about 21 of these left. 1 flies, and I just read a second's going to be flying in a year or so, and that's it. So we have this space shuttle, if you will, okay? These engines were Wright engines. They were not Pratt & Whitney's. They were troublesome engines, very troublesome. Typical TBO of an engine, time before overhaul, 2,000 hours, 1,500 hours. These engines, 100 hours maybe, 150. Rarely did they come back with 4 engines running. They had more losses and accidents than they did in combat with this airplane. When General LeMay took over the campaign in Japan, he lowered the bombing height, altitude, because these engines were overheating. They worked too hard. Really, it was one of these things where they said, what engine can we plug into this thing? And even though this was the biggest engine they had, it really wasn't adequate for its use. But you know, in wartime, you got to do what you got to do. And we'll go look at the supercharger and we got the cowl open up. You can look at it if you want. So, with all of this, this is actually 2 airplanes put together. Fifi has our tail. Where'd he go? Fifi has our tail because our tail was airworthy. We swapped it with them. As big as this airplane was, it did not have a steerable nose wheel. So he had to turn it like a tank. He'd brake one side and then he would put opposite engines to turn it. You guys all want to come in here. I want to close this up so that other people don't come in. Just watch your heads, and we're not going to go into Bombay yet. So this had a crew of 11. An average mission was about 13 to 15 hours a day. The oldest, it was the pilot here, it was 24. He was in charge. Youngest was 17. He was the tail gunner. So we had a 15-hour flight every day. They would get in this at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they wouldn't get back till 11 o'clock at night. This flew nonstop. 5,500 gallons of gas it held, okay? This was a very fast, this would do 325 knots at altitude. So the Zeros before would come from behind to get us, but because this was so fast, it came from the front. So that's why the Bombardier was a gunner. And he had upper and lower turrets slaved to him. So not only was he the Bombardier, he was a gunner. During the bombing run, the pilot would actually slave the autopilot over to the Norden bomb site. And the Norden bomb site / bomber flew the airplane. Pilot didn't fly to the target. The Bombardier did. He would fly to the target. When he got over the target, he would be the lead bomber. He would drop his bombs. Whoever was behind him, and they would have a few hundred of these in formation, by the way, a few hundred. That's where the aluminum overcast phrase came from, if anyone's ever heard that. So he would slave over, he would fly over to the target, he would drop his bombs, he would slave it back to the pilot, everyone would follow suit, they would turn and come back, all right? So now here we are firebombing Japan at 15,000 feet, okay, 3 miles up. The back bomber, one of the back bombers, and there was a co-pilot to a back bomber that worked here. He died last year. I worked with him on Wednesdays. Today's my day, and he would come in. Pieces of paper and wood from the homes would hit the windshield at 3 miles up. In fact, if they didn't close the bomb bays, they would find pieces of paper and wood in the bomb bay. Okay? That's how hot the firebombing was. Now, this did drop the atomic bomb, but I can give you these statistics. There was one raid of 100 bombers that dropped 200 tons of bombs, and they killed 80,000 people. The atomic bomb, the first atomic bomb, killed 70. So we tend to concentrate on the atomic bomb as being a bad thing, but honestly, all the damage we did collectively with conventional incendiary bombings far exceeds what the atomic bomb did.
Yeah, the firebombing was
terrible. All right, so here we have 11 guys that live here. And I say live because they were here 13, 15 hours at a time. When they flew the hump and they had extended tanks, they would go 24 hours. So 6 guys would live up front here. This bulkhead here gets closed, right? So that's pressurized. Don't forget, that turret behind him belongs in this hole. This is not a sunroof. See that hole up there?
Oh, yeah.
That turret comes all the way down. The radio operator on the right and the navigator on the left couldn't even see each other. They could only talk to each other on the intercom. That's how confined it was. So you had 6 guys living up here. Bombardier, pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, navigator, radio operator. This had a relief tube, but if you had to do anything else, you had to crawl through this tunnel, okay, 30 feet long, all the way into the back, and that's where the bathroom was. This tunnel is so narrow that they had to put a parachute on each end because they couldn't traverse the tunnel with a parachute on. They would get stuck. So they left one at each end. So I gave a tour to a radio operator who was from Bristol, Connecticut. And I walked him in here, and he said to me, he looks at it and he goes, "Oh my God," he says, "I jumped out of one of those." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "Well, we're coming back. We lost one engine, left engine, lost the second engine on the same side."
Oh boy.
Okay. Pilot has everyone get out. He opens the bomb bays. Everyone in the back gets out. Everyone starts coming out of the bomb bay here. Pilot's trying to hold it straight and level. The co-pilot chute doesn't open. He sees him go down while he's floating down, the radio operator. And then he sees the whole airplane wing over and go into the ground because the pilot couldn't get out in time to keep it straight and level. So he died in the crash. So I said to him, I bet you that was the last time you ever did that. And he says, actually, that was my first. That was his first day on the job. He was 18 years old. My first mission, I had to jump out, and the next day they put him in another one. There was no, you just did it. So here you have an 18, 19-year-old kids doing this stuff, and this is why I tell you when I do the high school, they have no clue.
They don't have
No, none. So there was another gentleman I gave a tour to from England who was the mechanical engineer who helped build these rails, because these were made in England, and these bombs would get hung up at altitude. So they would come out here and kick them off. Yeah, they would kick them off. And they kept getting these, messages saying, they're still getting hung up, and they would put bigger springs in there. And finally, he tells me, and I couldn't believe this because he literally worked on these, the grease they used was solidifying at that temperature, and that's why they weren't coming down. So all they had to do was scrape all the grease off, put a lighter weight grease in it, and it fixed it. So this is where the atomic bomb would have been. They had to modify it a little bit because it was too wide. So the Enola Gay was widened, but it was so high that it had to be put in a trench. And this has beta props, which means you can back this airplane up. The props actually turn completely around so you can go backwards. And they back this airplane up over the bomb. Okay? Talking to the navigator, it was a beautiful VFR day. He had to find a bridge, which he said he had no problem doing. They gave it over to the bombardier, he dropped it, and they were told to do a 270-degree turn as fast as they could and dive to get out of there. And there were 2 concussions they felt from that bomb. 1 bomb, 2 concussions. Now don't forget, this bomb detonated at about 1,500 feet above the surface. It didn't hit the ground. So Tibbets, who was the pilot, who was here maybe 5 years ago I talked to, he actually turned around to look at it again because the tail gunner says, oh my God, you should see this. Now, don't forget, they didn't know what they were doing. All they were told, and this is what both Tibbets and the navigator told me, they were told that you're going on a mission that will change the direction of the war. That's all they were told. So they get into this airplane with this big bomb. They just think it's some big-ass bomb, right? And they come home, they go to bed, and the next day they read in the paper what they had done. They didn't know it was a nuclear bomb when they were flying it. They were never told that. Never. So this guy he was funny. The navigator was like 95 years old, and he was doing a speech right over here. And someone raised his hand. He goes, well, did the radiation bother you at all? He goes, bother me? He says, I'm 95 years old. I'll go do it again if it made me do this. Because he was spry. I mean, he crawled right up there. 95, I couldn't believe it. He was thin and agile, He was funny too. So I sat with him for a while. He told me a lot of stories. So again, we have 6 guys here. Okay, this gets closed, so that's pressurized. The tube is pressurized. And don't forget that turret comes down almost to the floor. So there's very little room up there, trust me, very little room. So now what we're going to do is go out and hang a right.
A friend of mine who's 93 was a bombardier.
Out of 29?
I believe it was, but in fact, he's still in the veterans.
We're going to go right here. Yep.
And the first time he went up, he graduated from BU,
Yep.
and he forgot his suit, or he didn't put his suit on.
Mm-hmm.
He almost died of being frozen to death.
Oh, that had to be either a 17 or a 24 or 25 because those weren't pressurized.
Oh.
They had electric suits. They had to plug in. It was like an electric blanket sewn into a suit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have what's called blister gunners. Okay, you see this? This is the gun sight.
Yeah.
So when that sight's moved left to right, whatever gun it's connected to moves left to right and up and down. And when I say whatever gun, not only did you have the ability for remote control guns, but they could actually swap guns.
Really?
So let's say you are in this blister
That's right.
and you want another gun. And you're a slave to this bottom gun here, right? You could take the tail gunner's gun and it'll slave to it. So here we have remote control guns that can be slaved independently, okay? And when I show you the fire control computer, you'll be blown away. You won't believe it when I tell you. You have a
Yeah.
question?
The machine gun on top, is that connected to that bubble or this one here? 'Cause I can see that this guy was operating that thing. Well, the way that thing is pointed right now, you could blow the tail right off this gun.
I'll show you that. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. Yep. This had all the safety measures, and I'll show you how they did that. Yeah. So if you look here, you'll see where the tunnel comes out. Right here. It pops out right into this area, but the bathroom is about here. The bathroom is just a can with a seat on it, and it sits right next to the radar operator's desk. First guy that used the bathroom had to clean it. And the navigator of the Enola Gate told me, quote, "I never used that can." That's what he said. He says they would follow me around because they thought I'd use it, and he would never use it because I wasn't going to clean it. Yeah. So now we have 3 gunners here, okay? 1 on each side, and then we have this guy on top. See it? He's called the fire control barber's chair. You see how high it is? I tried to put a 10-year-old in there, and he barely fit. 10-year-old. That's how tiny that is. He could spin around 360 degrees, depending on what gun was connected to him. So now we have our 6 and our 3. That's 9. We have a radar operator that sits here, onboard radar. All he sat there with a scope. And then back here is the tail gunner. If you look at all the control surfaces of this airplane, you'll see how it has a different color aluminum. See it? See the color of this aluminum? That's fabric. So all the control surfaces are fabric. Why? Wait. Why is this airplane not painted?
Wait,
Sure, how much does a gallon of paint weigh?
I don't know, but that's heavy.
Think about it, how many gallons you need, okay?
100, 200 gallons?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of weight. That's how much fuel, right? This is where the tail gunner was. Now, and right in here, okay? But his vessel was right here. So from here to here is pressurized. From here forward is not pressurized. So when he got in here, he closed his hatch. That was his home, okay? Flying backwards. Usually a 17, 18-year-old, yeah.
But he had a good view of the bomb.
He did. He had the best view of the bomb, you're right. Okay, come on in this way. Tail skid, yes sir. This thing was so fully loaded. This thing weighed 17 tons loaded, okay? And at Tinian, the runway was made out of crushed shells. And I know this because of the co-pilot that spoke to me. He would have to go to the end of the runway, turn around, full power, flaps. He could only take off with ground effect. It's the only way they could get off. They would get off the air 20 feet or so, and Tinian was kind of like on a plateau, and they would actually descend before they would ascend. That's how heavily loaded it was. Okay, so who's going to be our gunner today? Who's a volunteer? Come on, come on, come on. You, come on. You're our gunner. Okay, your name?
Barney.
Barney. So Barney's our gunner.
I'm 17.
He's 17. I was going to give you 18, but I'll give you the 17. Barney goes to gunnery school. Not only does he have to learn how to fire this gun, but Barney has to be able to recognize every enemy fighter by sight and quickly. That's a difficult task when something's coming at you at 300 knots. But that doesn't stop there. Not only does he have to recognize, he has to remember every wingspan of all of those airplanes by heart. Could you do that? Well, I'm going to help you.
He can't remember his name.
He can't. That's why he didn't know what to tell me. I didn't know.
That's right.
So here we go. So Barney, this is our computer. Analog computer, 1944, built by GE, General Railroad, and Western Electric. Each gunner had one. Analog computer. I'm an electronic engineer. This is analog, guys. This is not an iPhone. All right, Barney. This here you got to hold because that's called the dead man switch. Why do you think that's called the dead man switch?
Don't want to find out.
All right, so put your hand there and put your hand here. You can stand here if you want, but you don't have to. So what we have here is Barney knows, I'm going to tell him, that a Japanese Zero has a 39-foot wingspan. So look at Barney, there's a Zero coming at us over there under the tip of the wing. Do you see it? Way over there? It's lit. I've got it lit for you. Okay. Look inside. What do you see? Tell everybody.
50, 60.
50, 60. Well, you need to put that to 39 with this knob. Hurry, because he's coming at us, okay?
Can't find the
Oh, we're doomed. We're doomed.
I can't even find the knob.
Okay, got to do a little faster than that because we're all going to die. You got it?
Yep.
Okay. So now, what else do you see in there?
Looks like almost a clock. Circle.
A circle. Turn this, Barney.
Gets smaller.
Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to take that circle and put it on the tips of the wings so that the circle just hits the tip of the wings. Okay?
Okay.
So now we've told the computer that what Barney has done is that that circle represents 39 feet. When that Zero gets closer, that circle is going to get bigger, right? What are we doing here?
Setting it up.
We're getting a range. It knows, right? Why do we want a range? Because bullet drop. So what this did, and this worked, if it was 600, 800 yards out, and Barney was doing his job and kept the circle getting bigger as it came closer, these guns would literally tip up, and as it came closer, would tip down, tip down, tip down. Automatically. 1944. So, now what do you do when the airplane's going left to right? Well, the navigator had the ability to put the airspeed into this, and as long as he kept that same range on the fuselage to the side, this would lead the target. And it worked. The co-pilot that was here told me that it worked tremendously well. Because don't forget, prior to this, they used the concept spray and pray. And literally, they just waited for the aircraft to run into the bullets, as opposed to you shooting at it. You just kind of put a wall of lead up and then hope that something ran into it, okay? But this worked. Everyone had one. Everyone had a computer. Everyone had a sight. And don't forget, we can share the guns, too. So if Barney wanted 2 guns, 3 guns, they could slave all 3, and they would all go together, and they would converge. 1944. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so the war ends. We win. Korean War starts. We drag these all out of mothballs, right? This airplane did 325 knots tops, okay? Most of the fighters did the 400s. Well, what did I say about the F-86? Almost did supersonic, right? Yeah. 600 knots or so. Supersonic changes. Speed of sound changes with temperature and barometer and blah, blah, blah. Well, this little thing could not do 600 knot airplanes. So very quickly, this computer became obsolete during the Korean War. Because it's the only bombers we had. So this thing went from, space shuttle to abacus, in no time at all. But during its realm, it was incredibly accurate. And to think that we did this in 1944 is truly incredible. If anyone they were good.
10 seconds?
Yeah, they were
15
good
seconds?
because they were on alert all the time. And I talked to this co-pilot. He said it was amazing how accurate they were. All right, so we're not done yet. So we're going to go this way. If you guys want to see that, I can bring you back. I just want you not to miss lunch. I want to show you the engine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, we just have a golden gauge and a no-go.
Right,
See, the wheel was exposed
right. Yep.
on the pipe.
You'll see it. We have it open. You'll see it.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, so this is our onboard radar. First bomber that had a radar, onboard radar. So now we have this airplane that I call the space shuttle. It's got everything, right? But how did they navigate from, let's say, the Marianas to Japan, or from Hawaii to the Marianas, or Hawaii to Tinian? As a pilot, what do you think the chart looked like?
Pretty unbelievable.
All blue, right? There's nothing there. So how did they navigate this monstrosity? Don't forget, there's no VORs, ADFs, GPS, LORAN, SHORAN, none of that yet. Okay?
North Star. Only kid, I don't know.
Well, you're right.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. The only way they could do it is celestial navigation. So here you have this space shuttle using what Christopher Columbus used to come to America. They used the sextant, and they used it through this bubble at the top. You see that bubble on the fuselage?
Yeah.
That's right in the beginning of the tunnel. He would sit in the tunnel with his legs hanging out into the forward compartment. He had to keep each star, it wasn't the North Star, but he had to stay on 3 stars, each star for 2 minutes. Once he did all 3 stars for 2 minutes, he would triangulate. But Christopher Columbus was doing 4 knots, okay? This is doing 300 knots. So 6 minutes has gone by since he started and when he ended. And he traveled a little further than Columbus did in the 6 minutes, right? So he had to actually extrapolate out where he was going to be. And the navigator told me he was plus or minus 5 miles either way. Yeah. Well, that's great at night, but what about during the day?
Son?
Sun. Very good. Yeah, sun. Yep. It's only one. It's not very accurate. And if you were lucky and you had a new moon and you had 2, it was even more accurate. But for the most part, they used the sun, the moon, and the stars. And they did use radar to scour the surface for if there was an island or something for a checkpoint, right? So the irony here is you've got this airplane cost $350,000 to build in 1944, by the way. 3.5 a day they built. So this is Jack's Hack. And if you want to take a picture, this is the place you want to do it. Does anyone know what a hack is?
Taxi.
There you go. So this is Jack's taxi. Jack was the pilot, 24-year-old.